Your primary responsibility as a project manager is to make sure that your project is on scope, on time, and within budget. Now, we can make and have missteps that does not allow us to actually meet those particular goals, whether you're seasoned project manager or a newbie. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some strategies and the things you need to avoid for making project mistakes. Mistake number one, prioritizing urgent tasks over important ones. This is a very common mistake that not just project managers make, everybody makes actually. We have this urgency, probably not even our own urgency, someone else's urgency, like, oh my goodness, I gotta get this done. I need you to do A, B, C, D. And guess what? That urgency, just right now with my voice, please, please go get it done. You have no idea, the president wants this. And boom, we have to drop everything, probably some important stuff that is also geared towards a deadline, etc. And we're focusing on urgent stuff all the time. But here's the thing. Is it really urgent? And whose urgency is it? Is it your urgency? Is it their urgency? That's what you got to figure out. If you're always working on someone else's urgency, then you have to stop and really ask the question, are they just unprepared? And as a result, everything is urgent, but it's now impacting on you and from your project perspective, not allowing you to really focus your attention on important tasks. So you really need to understand the difference between an urgent task, an important task. Yes, there's going to be some urgent tasks that come into play that you have to drop everything and get to it. It could be because you're working on something and now there's this major issue and now you have to firefight. That's urgent. Yeah, you should fix that. However, if you're always working on urgent stuff, you have a problem and you're just going to be drowning when it comes to projects. So one of the great ways to understand urgency is there's a priority matrix that you can take a look at, and there's quadrants to it. So you really have to understand what are you working on, and some things you're going to have to drop. And you may have to challenge some individuals who are constantly coming to you with urgency and maybe having to say no. Because everything that you should be doing should be working on important elements that are moving you toward your deliverable. And your project plan should be highlighting what those things are, and they should be your priorities, and that everyone should be rallying around that, knowing that those are the key things that everyone needs to work on. But again, just because it's urgent doesn't necessarily mean it's important, and you have to really challenge why is that popping up. And if it's because of bad planning, you may need to say no so that those individuals can start learning how to plan properly because they have a ramification of their bad planning and not just you constantly picking up the slack. Whew, really something you have to truly look at and a big mistake. If you want a little more information on this, you can check out my video on how to prioritize tasks properly. Just go to the YouTube search bar, Adriana Girdler, prioritize, and the video will pop up. As a side note, I want to bring to your attention this here. It is critical to know what the 6 basic things are for you to have a successful project. Now, how do you get this? In the comments below, write free download. Mistake number 2, not nipping scope creep in the bud or early enough. Okay, what is scope creep? A scope creep is when someone comes to you, or you yourself can do without even realizing it, you start adding to your project scope and it starts to run away with you. And this is very, very common with senior executives or outside stakeholders who don't understand the nitty-gritty detail within your project and the plan and what your team is really working on, where someone will say to you, hey, Adriana, you know what, can I chat with you for a minute? By the way, I know you're working on project ABC. Can you please just add this element? It's super simple, super easy, and I'm telling you it would help us out tremendously. Sounds great, doesn't it? Of course you want to help people out. However, that's scope creep. You're going beyond what you agreed to in your charter. This is why your charter is so important, because you lock down what that scope is and what's in and what's out. It's going to guide you. Really critical. But a lot of individuals don't understand that, don't know those details, and it's your job as a project manager to make sure you nip that in the bud. If not, you are going to be adding more time. You're going to be adding more probably budget because you're adding additional things and you need more resources or more time for your resources. And do you have any of that? Do you? Do you know? Probably not, because you're just accepting things. So in my SLAY program, and what I teach my coaching students is you need to have a really good change control process so that when this comes to you, it's not just about the form that people fill out regarding the change, it's the tool and technique to nip this in the bud and really challenge people in a very professional way, non-confrontational, as to, is this what you're asking, this scope creep, is it really important to the project? And it's a very simple template form that you just fill out pros, cons, etc. And interestingly enough, individuals, even when I just say that, hey, I got a form to fill out, can you please fill this out and come back to me? All of a sudden, that particular thing they wanted to add wasn't that important. Now, if it really is important, I'm happy to take a look at it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to get it approved and understand the impact it's going to have on the project. Mistake number 3, letting small issues evolve into big problems. I say this a lot in my other videos. You have to nip things in the bud and you have to address the elephant in the room. So what do I mean by all that? There are times on a project where, there are small problems. Someone's not delivering on their work. Someone has a little bit of an attitude. Someone keeps on interrupting or trying to derail the agenda or even, what you're trying to do in the project. You can't ignore it because if you do, it just builds. And all of a sudden it's like a layering and it's going to build into something really big and it's going to, I promise you, it's going to explode on you. And then what? That's not good project management. You have to understand what the risks are. You have to understand what your issues are. And when things come to the surface, particularly the small ones, it's so much easier to nip it in the bud as it's happening than to let it grow. So how do you nip things in the bud? You need to set expectations with your team. Those expectations could be around behavior. Those expectations can also be in regards to projects, tasks, due dates, how you want to communicate. Okay, guys, we have our WBS action plan. All of your tasks are in here. I'm not chasing you down for a status update. In fact, every Friday, you're going to go into our WBS action plan. I'm happy to remind you, and you're going to give me your update in the comment section for all items that are currently in the in progress section that we have identified. So that way they go in and they give you a status update, and it's used as a communication tool that you can then go back in and you can see how things are. So again, it's so much easier to deal with things as they're coming when they're tiny than they are when they're huge. Don't let it grow. It is such a big mistake, and just don't do it. Before we jump in the next tip, watch this. For a deep dive into the essentials of running successful projects, I'd love for you to join one of my Slay programs. Slay Project Management is an online course with step-by-step videos, tools, and templates for the full project lifecycle. Or go pro with Slay Pro. Everything in Slay plus weekly group coaching calls with me so you can tackle your real-world scenarios and issues to get on the right track. Ready to level up? Check out the details below. Mistake number 4, saying yes to everything. Okay, I can't tell you. Let me just back up. I know when a senior executive comes to us, we want to, or we feel obligated that we have to say yes to them. That is not your job as a project manager. Project managers, are supposed to be looking at the strategy of the project, understanding the strategy of the organization, and showing the pros and cons for decisions that are being requested of the project if it's not already approved scope item that you're supposed to be delivering on. So saying yes for the sake of saying yes so you can be agreeable actually shoots you in the foot. It's very similar to scope creep. But just because someone is asking you something doesn't necessarily mean you can do it or it makes sense to do it. So there is an art to being able to say no, and in saying it in a very professional way and really understanding where people are coming from. So it's a mindset, number 1, that you have to change, that, not to say yes to everything just for the sake of it, but to really vet it through. What are we trying to do? Does it make sense? Do we have the background information in order to be really successful with it? But then the second aspect as well is educating everyone on that too, and educating yourself on professionally how to say no when needing to say no, because sometimes you need to say no in order to move forward to things versus saying yes, because saying yes can sometimes stall you, it can derail you, it can get you off track. And as a project manager, that's not your job. Your job is to keep things on track, and your job is to look at things from a strategic standpoint. Be a strategic person who has insight, who is going to give the pros and cons so that people can understand what it is that they're asking. So say no occasionally, but just do it professionally. Mistake number 5, not planning for risk. Risk will always happen. You'll never have a project that doesn't have risk. It's the question of how large is the risk? Did you identify what they all are? The good news is if you follow my program and my ways of working, your charter is going to identify some initial risks, which is great. So you're never going to walk into a project with zero risk. But did you do some due diligence and do some additional risk analysis? That becomes really important. Don't ignore it thinking, oh, this project is only 6 months. Nothing is going to come to fruition. I can tell you right now, this is probably a big risk I see a lot of projects have, which is resource risk. That a lot of companies double or use resources for multiple projects. And there's probably, and maybe as I'm saying this, you guys are going, oh my God, oh, Adriana, absolutely. How did you know that that's what our organization does? And what resources or what organizations do with resources is they give them to a project, and then all of a sudden that resource is pulled away to do another project. And then you're going like, hey, wait a minute, that's now impacting on our deliverable and our timeline, yet you want me to do everything in the same amount of timeline, but you just took away a major resource. That's happened to me. So if you know that that's happening in your organization, you have to call it out as a risk in the beginning, day one in your charter, and you have to start planning for it. Becomes so critical so that you can have an understanding, how are we going to deal with this if this happens? That's what project managers do. We're supposed to look and try to identify to the best of our ability some unforeseen risks. We're not going to get them all, but if you show your due diligence that you've done all the risk mitigation, or if a risk comes to fruition that you deem was very low to happen, at least you can show the due diligence. You can't predict everything. If you could, I would be predicting the lottery numbers right now, but I can't. So I do risk mitigation instead. So critical. Don't drop it. Please don't drop it, because it's just going to help you out. And when it does, you'll be so glad that you did it. Do you remember this free PDF I was talking to you about earlier on in the video on the 6 basics to keep your projects from failing? Well, if you want it, which I definitely recommend that you definitely get it, it's just going to help you out tremendously. And if you don't, it will be mistake number 6 for you, by the way. Go in the comment section, say free download. We'll send you that PDF. But if you want it immediately, by all means, under this video, there's a link and you can request it there too. Watch this next video on being proactive. And on that note, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this amazing community, and we'd love to hear from you. Any comments, put them below.